Mike Pendleton joining us today. We're obviously going to plug all the work on the descriptions below of this video. And, of course, plug everything at the very end because it is important that the people, the millions and millions of people understand how great of a job you are doing covering these things like blankets and understanding that the clock is getting close to midnight for the Chicago Bears in this season. Justin Fields' first campaign as the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears, and what might be the end, should be the end in a lot of people's opinion, including mine, of Matt Nagy and or Ryan Pace at the same time. Your thoughts of what's been happening for one of the charter franchises in the NFL?
Well, I think Monday Night Football broadcast hit it on the head. I think it doesn't start and end on the field and on the sidelines. It starts up top, and if you listen or read or do anything in terms of coverage or just being a fan, you know that the bigger problems lie with George McCaskey and Ted Phillips, and that's really the easiest answer I can give you, right? Adam Hogue wrote a great piece, and I guess I'm going to continue to plug it. I plugged it on my own show. He wrote a great piece about why the pros and the cons into keeping Ryan Pace. He changed the football building, as he put it, up there in Lake Forest, and everything that the Bears are trying to do to become one of the more attractive franchises. They're historic. Just because you're historic doesn't mean you're attractive. As dinosaurs, how that feels. So, we're trying to really avoid the Bears falling into prehistoric times. That's what the New York Jets are for. And we're going into that. Unfortunately, we're falling into that territory. Well, we're among one of the NFL's original franchises. Yeah, and all those original franchises, pretty much besides the Packers, all suck right now. And that's just me being very, very honest and part of the fan in me coming out. There needs to be changes. Mike, I don't necessarily know if Ryan Pace needs to go. I think Ryan Pace may need a new role, but I think he needs to stay. So, and I think Ryan Pace needs a little bit more credit for finding late gems in the draft, for taking chances on certain people in free agency. Allen Robinson is one of those guys. I look at Akeem Hicks as kind of the poster child for Ryan Pace, tenure as a GM. Ryan Pace was in New Orleans when they drafted Akeem Hicks. There's these little things just looking at this year. And listen, one game on Monday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings doesn't tell all, but Thomas Graham Jr. comes out the practice squad, earns a spot on the 53-man roster after his incredible debut. The secondary was depleted, and we thought we were going in with a bunch of nobodies. I'm not saying Thomas Graham Jr. is going to line up on the opposite side of Jalen Johnson for the next 10 years. But what I'm saying is it starts to make free agency a little bit easier when you go, all right, we're probably not coming to terms with Allen Robinson, so we got to go wide receiver shopping. Can I spend X amount of dollars in shopping for wide receivers when I probably need corners? Then you have someone tap you on the shoulder. We don't need to invest as much into our corners because we have guys like TGJ, which should be his nickname because it's so much easier to say that. But you have a guy like a TGJ, and you can really start to hone in on some of your other needs. Then you start to make difficult decisions. Does a Hicks come back? Does a Cody Whitehair comes back? Is James Daniels getting another contract? And I say all this because it's got all of those answers need to start being put in place before I can start talking to you about a head coach. Because
you're right.
I had a great conversation with David Kaplan on one of my most recent episodes, and he kind of made it known, listen, Chris Ballard was in the building and said, I want the job. And they said, what's the first thing you do when you get the job? He said, I cut Jay Cutler tomorrow. And they're like, all right, thank you for your time. We got to go. Mm-hmm. So now Chris Ballard kind of gave up. He took the risk on Carson Wentz, right? And Philly's loving it. They're going to get a first-round pick. It's all great. But you got an MVP candidate in the second year in Jonathan Taylor. You got Carson Wentz playing like the Carson Wentz of old. You've got a Defensive Player of the Year candidate in Darius Leonard each and every single year. I mean, I'm not against a guy like Chris Ballard being in my building. And you shouldn't be, right? But Ryan Pace was the choice. So, and then you have a coach and Bruce Arians who wanted this job, who wanted to coach the Chicago Bears. Well, thank God he didn't because he won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, if the same decision makers are going to be in place, I can't tell you what I want first. I can't tell you if I want a new GM or a new head coach first. I will say this: if you fans out there believe Byron Leftwich, and I'll come back and eat crow at the start of next year if I'm wrong. I think Byron Leftwich is almost a shoo-in to be the next coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know that, but when it makes dollars, it makes sense. And we're talking about one of the most notable names in that franchise's history, with a ton of opportunity, a ton of cap space, and an owner who's going to get out of the way. The Bears don't have that. What they do have, they have a very nice running back. They have a speed demon in Darnell Mooney, and they have all the makings of what could be a franchise quarterback. And I'm gonna go a little hot take here. They also have the makings of a franchise left tackle in Tevin Jenkins. I understand his first 2 games as a pro have not been good. I believe 4 penalties in each game. He got in the face of the Vikings defensive players and got into it with Sheldon Richardson, cost him a big personal foul flag on Monday Night Football. But he was the only one. He was the only single person defending his quarterback. Unfortunately, the hit was legal and all of that, but you don't hit the quarterback like that. And Tevin Jenkins knew that. And when they drafted him, all the experts said, this guy's got a mean streak. He's going to go to war with your team. So he's got to work out a few of the physical things and a few of the mental things. But for a guy coming in the latter stages of his rookie year, coming off of back surgery, most people would walk away from back surgery. And he's being thrown into the fire. So, listen, there are building blocks in place. I don't know. I would say Ryan Day out of Ohio State is the sexy pick, but you need so many things to happen, right? As Kaplan and a lot of people have speculated, you would probably need to bring in his agent, Trace Armstrong, to be the team president or some type of football leader in the front office. And then you could probably get both of them in a package deal. But there's so many things that would have to happen for that to happen. But I would take Byron Leftwich off my wish list, and I would figure out first who's making the decisions. If Ted Phillips steps out and George McCaskey goes, you know what, Ryan, it's your game. Here's the keys. Here's everything. We're gonna trust you. But if it doesn't work, you've got the shortest leash. We'll let you go next year. So yeah, you might hire a coach. And you may draft and you may do free agency, but if we have a colossal, disappointing season in 2022, you're gone. And I don't know many teams that would make that sort of deal, but it may be necessary because the Bears have a team that's not too completely set on having a full rebuild, but they're not playoff contenders yet. So it's hard to say because Jacksonville's completely rebuilding. So a guy like Leftwich can go, I got my hands on Trevor Lawrence. I can do this, this, and this. The whoever is in charge of the Chicago Bears are almost going to be like travel agents. They need to sell you on why this location and this resort and all of this will be better than the resort down the beach on another island. We have to know, why is this the place that we can lay our head for the next 9 months as football fans when the football season starts in 2022, because this year's over. I think without mentioning it, Matt Nagy will be gone. But even if Matt Nagy goes and Ryan Pace go, I don't know necessarily that they're going to be bad wherever they land, because they will land somewhere. And so I would just caution that. Bears fans are some of the most passionate and loyal, and they're also one of the most verbal fan bases. And so I would just say, I wouldn't jump all over Matt Nagy every single week. Yeah, it's frustrating, but the bigger problem, and it's embarrassing when 2 things happen, Mike. It's embarrassing when the Monday Night Football broadcast has to tell the national audience that the problems start upstairs with people you've never heard of as a football fan. We all hear of them here in Chicago. And it's embarrassing when you're mocked on all of your biggest games. Tony Romo and Jim Nantz had a field day against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year. Yeah, the game was a blowout, and I don't know what I expected them to say. But week in and week out, when the Bears were on that number one broadcast, whether it was CBS, Fox, or Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, even against the Packers, wow, the Bears look great. Jakeem Grant this, Jakeem Grant that. By the second half, they were laughing at us. That's just what the kind of precedent is for the Chicago Bears right now.
Well, and I think this is why, and I'm glad you're bringing this much fire for this conversation with the Bears, because my biggest issue with this team all season has been how undisciplined this is, how frustratingly impatient on top of stubborn Matt Nagy has been when it comes to the maturation and bringing along a Justin Fields, being married to his play calling and his playbook, opposed to adjusting it for who the future is. You would think just as a human, right? And I actually think Matt Nagy's a nice guy in general, but we're just speaking professionally.
Well, so am I.
Yeah. And we could talk about how bad I am at my job, and I might be a nice guy, right? Like this is the thing, right? Like we have to be able to separate the two, because all I know is that if my job is on the line and my career is on the line, is on this kid, and I have to develop this kid, and it's on his rocket of an arm that my career flourishes, I'm attaching myself to the hip of Justin Fields. But from day one, it's been a bunch of two-way talk. It's been a bunch of hurdles. It's been a bunch of nonsense. And finally, I think a bunch of professionals on that locker room kind of started smelling it. And I think the other thing that was a tale to show you where this Matt Nagy lost his team, and I don't mean lost in the very stereotypical locker room talk, when this team is how undisciplined it is. This is not a disciplined team. This is a team that's a bunch of boneheaded plays. And here's the thing. You're not good enough to get away with it. You're not good enough to complain about referees screwing you out of a game because you're not good. Only good teams get to do that. They get the benefit of the doubt, not this Bears franchise. And I'm fascinated to know your final thoughts as we kind of wrap this up. This NFL season in general, just the roller coaster that it's been. I feel like every single week we learn everything and then forget all about it because it means nothing the very next week because the league just changes so much and it's just so many variables. What would be one lesson you think you've learned from the 2021 NFL season that can kind of correlate your feelings about the Bears too? What is just something that is just all-encompassing of the season you watched in the National Football League and that team in Soldier Field?
Inconsistency. That's everything. That's literally everything. I'm going to take a quick rant here. And, it's inconsistency in MVP talk, and COVID-19 talk, and COVID-19 protocols. And the Chiefs are very bad. Now the Chiefs look like Super Bowl favorites. Aaron Rodgers is an awful human being, and he's immunized. And how could he lie to us? To, wow, he might be MVP. To Matthew Stafford and the Rams are great. And, Matthew Stafford and the Rams are struggling, and now the Arizona Cardinals are going to run away with it. Oh, by the way, they just lost to the Detroit Lions. The only consistent thing I know is the Bears are going to lose. They're going to complain about bad calls, and John Harbaugh is going for 2. Those are the only 2 things I know for the rest of the season. That's it. Seriously. And on the flip side of things, you got fantasy football owners killing themselves inside because they don't know what's happening in the final weeks of this season because it's so inconsistent. I tell my friends all the time, you guys are horrible people if you're rooting for players, and this is in general, for fans in general, fantasy or not. You're horrible people if you root for players to get injured. Root for them to have bad games. But now COVID came around and they're like, oh, man, this guy's on the COVID list. I hope he stays. And it's like, what? They're like, dude, I hope he's not vaccinated, so he's out 10 days. And it's like, but I hope my grandma got the vaccination. Like, it's inconsistent in fans, too. So, man, at the end of it all, listen, I'm going to disagree with you on one point. Cassius Marsh did have a reason to be very upset on that Steelers game on Monday Night Football. But this, unfortunately, and I'm so glad you brought up, the lack of discipline, because my first piece I wrote for On Tap Sports Network for Bears on Tap was the Bears' lack of discipline reeks of Nagy. And that's really it, right? It's almost the only comparison I have for you, Mike, is back in the early 2010s decade when Geno Smith and Rex Ryan were married together. Geno Smith was bad. Geno Smith was just bad. And Rex Ryan has to be the fall guy. Rex Ryan is on his way out. It's week 17. Yes, kids, there used to be an NFL season with 17 weeks. It's week 17 in the NFL, and Geno Smith goes off against the Miami Dolphins. I think he was nearly perfect in his pass attempts. He threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. You may want to stat check me on that, but I believe I'm right. And that was Rex Ryan's last game. His office had already been cleaned out, everything. And he's probably sitting there like, really? It's as bad as you knew things were going to be bad. And I hate to throw myself under the bus, and I'm just going to clarify this for any family members who watch this. Not that they do, but I don't cheat in my relationships. I just want to say that, right? But the equivalent of this Bears season, the only analogy I could have is when Justin Fields makes his debut and Myles Garrett goes, yeah, I don't know what they're doing over there, because I would have rolled him out. I would have moved the pocket more. They had no game plan for what we thought they were going to do for him. That is the equivalent of being a man in a relationship and a random guy seeing you out at a bar and goes, oh, you say you love your girl, but I just saw you talk to 5 other people. If I was you, I would have just stayed home, held your girl, watched a movie with her, brought her some food, and you're like, see, I wanted to do that, but like, I'm married to me. Like, what I do is what I do best. And just because I know it's best for me means it's best for us. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. That's literally it. Next, I didn't do anything wrong. They've got to get used to my playbook. They got to get used to me. Listen, in dating and marriage, and I know you were recently married. Congrats to you. So in dating and marriage and sports and life, it can't be a one-way street. And the Chicago Bears, from the top all the way to the bottom, have been a one-way street. And it's too dysfunctional to be like, couples counseling will work for us. It's not going to. People need to move out. People need to look to go their separate ways. And you know what? It's Christmas, so I don't want to be bah humbug over here. I want to end this on a good note, and it's hard to. But at the end of the day, Bears fans, you got a little bit of mistletoe with Justin Fields. We can all find love under Justin Fields together. We don't have to kiss, but we can all be in love under that mistletoe. We can all love each other with that. And there are people who say this kid's not the answer. And I say to you, what game are you watching? I believe the stat is Trevor Lawrence has only thrown 1 touchdown in his last 6 games or so, like that. You'll never hear it. Watch Justin Fields lean down to his right to tie his right shoe, but start tying his left shoe, and people will castrate him for it. So that's the town we live in. That is the territory we come in. Mike, we didn't talk about basketball today, right? We didn't do that. Partially because I'm a Knicks fan, and you know that. Thank you for that. Yeah. But the Chicago Bulls, you can't talk about them unless there's a Derrick Rose or a Michael Jordan conversation. And I'm not putting those two in the same conversation. But now in Chicago, we have a great team, with a great coach, with a great organization, because those in charge got out of the way. When the Cubs won the World Series, people got out of the way. The Ricketts came in, Theo Epstein came in, and they were just allowed to do, I can't believe I'm quoting Bill Belichick, do their job, right? You need people in place who are good at their job and allow them to do their job.
Competent. It doesn't mean competent people.
It doesn't mean Ted Phillips needs to be homeless and unemployed, or George McCaskey needs to go live in a retirement home. And I'm not saying this because it's my thoughts. I'm saying this because this is what fans think. This is what fans think. Like, oh my God, I can't. Because I will say this, and I may be in the 1% of people who feel this way. Ryan Pace should be back next year. For the amount of late fines that he has had in the later stages of the draft, you have to give it to him for being ballsy to go, I missed on my first quarterback draft trade, and it was bad. But then for that same quarterback to come in here during the preseason, sure, preseason or preseason, but light up your team, his old team in his old stadium, and then look at that mistake and go, yeah. I know the fire is hot. I know I get burned when I touch fire. But you know what? I'm going to put on some fire protective gloves, and I'm going to go make a trade for another guy. And he may be just even better than what we had in the past. So you have to give it for the stones that Ryan Pace has. Do I think there needs to be another football voice next to him? I do. But that doesn't mean he needs to be gone as GM. Or maybe you keep him in your football room, you move him to another office, and you bring in more competent people, as you just said. So it's difficult. I can't predict a future head coach. I can't predict the future GM. But I will say this. The problem fans probably have is they're stuck in prehistoric feelings, right? We want that grind, nose in the dirt type head coach who's going to yell and scream at players. And just like Justin Fields said, at Ohio State, we would run laps for mistakes. fans are going, oh, yeah, that's college. But there's some fans that go, we want a coach to make them run 5 laps per mistake. Those coaches there's not many of them left. And if I'm going to go shoot for the moon, hi, Sean Payton, we've been rumored to you for years. That wasn't fun this year, was it? Sure, you beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers twice, but what did that get you? You really want Jameis Winston? Or do you want to come home, Sean? You want to come home? Do you want to come home? Because you're one of the very few guys left in this business, because it's all about the sexy coordinator, the sexy play caller, the one who's going to get the most out of your quarterback. And I'm really stealing a lot of what David Kaplan said to me, but I couldn't agree more. What I want in the next Bears head coach is a leader of 53 men who doesn't wait until week 15 to get a personal unsportsmanlike conduct flag thrown because he's chewing out the refs. That to me was banging on your ex's front door saying, I love you though, take me back. And it's, sorry, your stuff's already on the front lawn, you got to go. Props to Matt Nagy. I will call out Bears fans for their treatment of him towards the end of the season. The guy is still a human being. So chanting at his son's football game is an absolute no, and it's kind of a disgrace for the city. I'll just say that. But I want a leader of 53 men. I want a leader who's not afraid to call out the protected quarterback draft pick, saying we don't need jump passes and we don't need this and we don't need that. I want that guy. And maybe that guy is an offensive coordinator, and maybe he is an offensive genius. But I want a guy who's going to come in, demand respect, command respect, and earn respect of every single player in his locker room. I want a guy, Mike, that a player like Akeem Hicks can go, I could go to Arizona, I could go to Steelers, I could go to Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I could probably convince like the Buffalo Bills to give me some money, and I could go win a freaking Super Bowl. But I said in September I wanted to retire a Chicago Bear, and the front office didn't make it feel like that was an opportunity. But you know what? I know this guy that they just hired, and this is a guy I want to play for every single. Insert GM name here. I'm going to give you a Chicago Bear discount. I'm going to come back. I'm going to retire a Bear. You got 2-3 years out of me, and that's it. That's the guy I want them to hire. A guy who's going to command respect in the locker room, but also bring people in because of the name and the value system he has. It's got to be all in.
It's going to be a fascinating offseason. It's going to be a fascinating final 2 weeks of the NFL season. I think if you're going to keep Ryan Pace, I'm going to need him to develop a better scheme when it comes to diverting money, when it comes to understanding how important it is to have some form of draft capital. But I do agree with you. He does have a keen scouting eye, and I don't think you just get rid of something like that. I do not want him being the main football voice in this organization anymore. And I agree with you. You bring in somebody who's smart, who's got connections. You bring in somebody like a Louis Riddick in some form of a football man operations to be that guy, to get you, to land you a Sean Payton or the next Sean Payton. You find somebody. I think a rock that they need to turn over is find yourself a special teams coordinator, somebody who has to talk to all the different rooms in a football office, who gets people promoted from linebackers and running backs, who talks to wide receivers. I think you're 100% on it when you say you need a CEO of the Chicago Bears. And I think that is what they need to find, and it starts from the very top. So we can have a conversation about bringing Bill Belichick in for all you want. But if you don't have the guy in the captain chair, it doesn't matter. Speaking of captain chair, he is one of the leading men who is covering MMA and now the Chicago Bears. He is one of our favorites. Gave us a bunch of times, essentially 2 whole segments on MMA and now on the Chicago Bears. He's the one and only Mike Pendleton. Mike, where can the people of the Sports Cubicle and Sports from the Couch follow you, support you, and get ready for an awesome 2022 with you?
Yeah, at MP2310 on Twitter is where I'm mostly active. My podcast on the mic, MIC. I'm not that self-absorbed in my own ego. It's not MIKE, but on the mic is under my YouTube channel, Mike Pendleton, just my name. There's no specialty to it, so you can find me on there. Please help me get to 100 subscribers. Like, that was always the goal by the end of this year. It's not going to happen in 10 days, but that would be beautiful to get closer to it by the end of this year. Other than that, man, I'll just say this. I always appreciate you having me on, and I'll just make a sort of, I guess, self-commitment statement on your show here, because it's hard to do it on your own show, right? Because you don't know who's watching. But on your show, because I got to hold myself accountable, you know, I've admittedly held back a lot in my content production because of the equipment that I have. And, you know, with the holiday season coming up, I've had a few people around me kind of say, hey, that's going to be changing soon. You're going to get a new laptop, and then it's on you to really run with things. So I'm in the works of putting together a better situation for what I truly feel I should be doing in this space. So I do feel like come 2022, as long as the light bulbs go on and I keep the lights on upstairs, I think that, you know, there will be a lot to be desired, and I've left a lot to be desired from it in this space. But I think in 2022 I can make a statement. It's not a New Year's resolution. It's almost a guarantee. I mean, Mike, and your listeners, that you'll see a lot more of me next year. You know, I definitely fell on the easy built-in excuse of my equipment sucks, but I definitely want to be on and really not that anyone knows, but not doing Zoom off my cell phone. You know, so having a setup like you have, having a space behind me that looks like a real space, and really doing a lot more. So I look forward to that. I look forward to talking more with you. You can literally call me whenever. You got to stop the 1 a.m. phone calls, though. I'm usually sleeping.
Absolutely.
And no. I really don't want to talk about Matt Nagy's breakfast at 1 a.m. So whatever you want to talk about, we can talk about it whenever you want to talk about it, except at 1 a.m. But in all seriousness, man, I always appreciate you having me on. At MP2310 on Twitter, the YouTube channel, like I said, Mike Pendleton. And, you know, I write for OnTap Sports Network, OnTapSportsNet.com, my MMA news, and every once in a while on CageSidePress.com. But that's where I'm at right now.
It's going to be a wonderful 2022 for you, for the brand, and all the work that you're doing. We're excited to see what you got going, and I could speak for Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, myself, and the listeners of the Sports Cubicle. We can't wait to hear what you have to say when the Bears finally make their moves. And this is a guy, if you're looking for credentials, Luke Thomas, Ariel Helwani, guys on top of this industry in the MMA world. And then I'm vouching for him when it comes to the work he's put in the NFL and the NBA, Major League Baseball, the work he's put in. This guy's got credentials. This guy's legit, and he's a good dude. Please support him. Check out the YouTube channel. Check out the podcast. And, of course, welcome him with open arms when he joins us back when the Bears make moves. The one and only Mike Pendleton joining us here on the Sports Cubicle, Sports from the Couch, with Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, myself, Mike Mercado. We got more coming up next here on WCPT 820 AM.